Hello and welcome to another episode of It Came From the Page. And today we're doing something that I haven't done in a few months, and that is a monthly reading wrap-up. Just how many books did I read in the month of February? I'm not going to tell you. You can count if you really want to, but I know it would be better SEO to put the number of books I read in the description of the video. Here's the thing. The amount of books you read doesn't matter. This is just my own experience. I don't want to make anyone feel bad. These are just things I read and my opinions on them. So that is why there's no numbers. No numbers are associated. So you don't have to compare yourself to anything. Also, there will be quite a bit here. This will be a fairly lengthy video. Keep in mind, though, I did add a lot of comic books to my Goodreads. So in the last few years, I haven't actually been counting when I read comics towards my completion rates or anything like that. Recently, I've come to the conclusion, the numbers absolutely do not matter. You're still reading them. You still have opinions on them. Why don't you take a thing to talk about them? So you will see things like graphic novels and some manga appear on this list. Just, how it goes. I'm not doing individual comics, because individual comics are like this. So if it's like a graphic novel or like a volume of a manga, then I'll log it. So that is that. So I'm doing another thing I'm going to do, which is the first time doing on this type of video, is doing worst to bests. Because let me tell you, not everything I read this month was good. And let's just get into it. Starting with Sinister War, which is an amazing Spider-Man collection. And it sucked. This is technically, it's like a weird in-between of two other, there's a huge Spider-Man event going on with some stupid demon bullshit, and in the middle of that, the demon goes, "Oh, all you Spider-Man villains, why don't you team up and attack Spider-Man?" We haven't seen that happen a bajillion cajillion times. And it's not like it hasn't been fun in the past. It can occasionally be fun. And I picked it up because of, oh wow, that's a lot of characters in the Sinister Six, going at it and having a fun battle. Because there's I think there's 6 teams of 6 villains. So there's varying quality. And there's also varying levels of, does that even count as a Spider-Man villain? You're putting that person in there? And the artwork is quite good. It's cool to see all these big artwork and splash pages, but the story is just god-awful, and it's just not that interesting. So I would definitely skip this. Most of what Nick Spencer has done on Spider-Man has been okay. I mean, I like his run a little bit better than Slott's, although I don't think he's had the amount of good, consistent quality run that Dan Slott did, because I do think Superior Spider-Man by Dan Slott is absolutely fantastic. I really like that. Other Dan Slott books, though, and other Dan Slott everything else, I was I'm a bit iffy on how he writes Spider-Man. So I think Nick Spencer has had some really interesting stories that he's told, but once you get into these big overarching plots, and once you have Spider-Man fighting demons, it's just, get out of here. No one wants this. It's lame. It's boring, lame. Ugh. Don't like it at all. So this was a pretty big waste of time. One which is going to get me into trouble, because this is my next one, and it's Swan Song. It's Robert R. McCammon's Swan Song. I did not like this book, at all. It felt like you were going to church, and you're going to church in the 80s, and it's just some guy being and another thing that's wrong with youth today is, have you heard of this Faces of Death? Have you heard of rock and roll music? And it's oh my god, it's just and it's, it gets compared to The Stand a lot, and I think the biggest, how I would define both books is that The Stand believes in the separation of church and state, where I do not think Robert R. McCammon does, because Swan Song is very, very heavy-handed in religion. It's got all of my least favorite tropes in fiction. You have, basically mental illness solved by prayer. There's some magical amulet that's the grace of God. Blech, who cares? The villain is 100% just a lamer version of Randall Flagg, in my opinion. Other people disagree. There is this thing near the end where all of our characters end up as hotties, because you, for whatever reason, it's like, if you're a good, holy person, God lets it show on the outside what you are on the inside. And I'm like, boo this, man. That's so lame. Why do I want to read about a bunch of hotties? And then, like, the bad people becomes, like, Skeletor, and, like, one of them becomes, like, a lizard man, and I'm like, that's way cooler than being a hottie. If I had the choice, I'd be a lizard man. Who would not want to be a lizard man? Anyways, apparently I wouldn't be allowed to be a lizard man, or I would. It's interesting because there are scenes in this that I think are like directly out of the Stand. Like there's a tunnel sequence that I'm like, oh, this is just like a much worse version than that scene in the Stand. The plot is like, as far as like pacing and plot goes, yeah, this is probably better than the Stand in terms of the progression. But all the things that I really like about the Stand is basically like these little meandering things and these thoughts about like, oh, what does it mean to restructure the world? Oh, what's all the ins and outs? And the ideas of evil that Stephen King has are a lot more interesting than the ideas of evil that Robert R. McCammon has in Swan Song, because this is just so annoying. It just feels like it's written by like an evangelical from the 80s. Like it's just, just so boring. And I don't feel like you knew many of the characters too well. Of course, the action is good. I mean, it's Robert R. McCammon. Robert R. McCammon can't write a bad action sequence because his action sequences are always great. So, you know, there are pieces and bits that I like about this. There was one character named Joshua. I liked him. That is the only character, though, I really liked and felt like there was, like, interesting stuff going on. It just really felt like it was very trite, good versus evil and blah, blah, blah. It just felt like I was being preached to, and I'm like, ugh. If I wanted to be preached to, I'd go back home. I don't care about this bullshit. Next up, Trespassing Across America, one-man epic, never done before, and sort of illegal hike across the heartland. So, this book is not very good, but there are segments that I did enjoy. It's basically a plot of this white man. It's important to reference that it's a white man, because this is something no one else would be able to do. Hikes and trespasses through all of these like rural farmland over where the Keystone Pipeline would eventually end up being like laid. So right before they do the pipeline, he follows all of the areas as where the pipeline would be. Some of these people he meets along the way, it's kind of interesting. He's got some interesting opinions. He's got a lot of biases, and he does some work to kind of try to combat his own biases, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's like very well... I don't think it's very well explored. He has some pretty shitty things to say about people who are suffering from like homelessness and stuff like that, and you know, drug addiction and stuff like that. It's just like, you know, it's a very much like he goes to travel through and try to convince all these farmers about the dangers of the pipeline, which is like a noble goal because environmentally it's like a terrible thing to do. But he has no understanding of how their life is and how their life is lived. So like he doesn't even know about like, you know, he doesn't even know half the ins and outs of farming, which is like, if you're really going to do a journey like this and try to talk to people, you need to get on their level and talk to them like they're people and not just come at them with one idea of, hey, you can't do this. You need to go like, hey, here's why. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about your farm landing. Let's come to you as a person who can like, because you're like, of course, again, I'm only talking about like a white man being able to do this because most other people would have got shot. So it's there is another much more interesting thing about the oil industry later on that I think really made this book even more crappy. But there are some descriptions of him just hiking that were pretty interesting and pretty, you know, just enjoying nature. You know, that stuff was good, but on a whole, meh. Next up, Extreme Carnage, another comic book. This is very much like if you're one of those people who grew up in the 90s and you're a fan of Venom, who is this alien symbiote who gave Spider-Man a new costume, but it was really alive, and then it got off of him, and then it got onto Eddie Brock, and then it became a villain, and then Eddie Brock's symbiote had a baby, and then Venom's baby became Carnage, and Carnage just, like, killed people. He just, like, is this, like, tentacle thing with all goopy with Spider-Man's powers, essentially, and he likes to make little knives, and he's a serial killer. It's very, very 90s, and this is written not in the 90s. This was actually from last year, and they just have been continuously addressing Carnage and all these different aspects. This one especially is like reuniting all of these disparate elements of symbiote lore and various symbiotes that have kind of popped up throughout the years. And I know most of them because I was reading comics in the 90s, but there were a few of these where I was like, huh? Who's that guy? That's a weird... I don't know who that is. That's interesting. So they have been just adding symbiotes upon symbiotes upon symbiotes. Some of the artwork is good. Some of the artwork is bad. It's very inconsistent throughout this entire storyline. But for the most part, it's fun. Like, you know, it's a fun little comic book read. It's interesting that they're trying to turn the symbiotes into basically mutants in this, which is just very fascinating because they're really kind of tackling a lot of the themes and ideas that they normally tackle with mutants in typical Marvel stuff. So, I mean, that much is interesting. The art is cool. There's some cool little goopy scenes where goopy monsters are fighting. So, I'm a 90s kid. I enjoyed it. Next up is Long Arm and the Sheep War. This, of course, I listened to as part of my Garb audio books for the Wasted Weekend. This was an abridged version of a Long Arm novel because it's on like 2 cassette tapes. So I feel like a little weird even kind of reviewing or noting that I read this book because I did read an abridged version of it. But it was fun enough. It was a good, fun story. It certainly wasn't up to the quality of early Long Arm, I feel, because I felt like this is a little bit more, I guess, crude and a little bit less fun and more creepy in certain aspects. But the actual Western plot was actually not too bad. Like, it was actually like a half decent Western, but like all the fun smutty bits were just like not up to their normal snuff. Although there was an amazing romance sequence that I did share on that blog because the voices that were used were just hilarious. So that much I did enjoy. And I did enjoy reading this. It's just I don't think it was as fun as some of the other ones that I've read. Next up, this is a manga, Kaiju number 8, volume 1. Now, of course, I was going to eventually pick this up because it's called Kaiju number 8, and you know me. I love Godzilla, I love King Kong, I love all them giant monsters. So I was definitely interested in this particular story. This story is interesting. I mean, it's kind of just sets up a very typical shonen story. If you're not familiar with manga, just like think of your like very typical like coming of age, like, oh, this person has superpowers and they gotta do some superpower bullshit. And it starts out where it's actually a lot more interesting than what it becomes because it's about these people who are the kaiju cleanup crew, and they're people who like clean up after these kaiju defense forces like shoot and kill a bunch of kaiju, right? And it's way more interesting to just follow the plot line of people who are like cleaning up after this. Like, I thought that was a way more interesting take than the main character being able to turn into like a kaiju and then fight the kaiju, and it's like, ugh, that's boring. It's like Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan was way more interesting before the reveal that one of the characters could become a Titan. Like, it's way more interesting to have just humans be under powers and have to survive, in my opinion. But that's just me. It wasn't terrible. I did like how a lot of the characters, not all of them, but a lot of the characters are like adults. There's like our main character, I think, is like in his early 30s, late 20s. Like, it's very much like a slice of life. Like, oh, life has passed me by, and oh, am I old man? And I thought, oh, that's cool, because, most of these are like, a lot of manga is like power fantasies for adolescent teen boys, and they end up being extremely creepy to read as an adult. So I just keep away from them for the most part. But they're all adults, so that was a lot more interesting to follow this kind of story from somebody who is quote-unquote past their prime. Anyways, it's fine. The actual kaiju, though, that he turns into looks hella cool, so I'll give it that. I might read another one of these, but I won't be putting it at the front of any pull list. Next up, I read some Warhammer 40k comic books. Don't worry, I won't get in this too much, but of course there's a lot of Warhammer stuff in this. Just bear with me. So this is Will of Iron. So Volume 1 is the one that I kind of ranked at the bottom. I just think it's really very typical in setting up a Warhammer story. The artwork is awesome, but the plot is kind of just very run-of-the-mill. Like, oh, we have to go and catch this artifact that exists on this planet, and the planet's at war, and it's fun, and there's like all these people like fighting and dueling and stuff, and it's like, oh, that's cool, but it wasn't anything super special, but it was very fun because it does kind of talk about, it's very cheesy, but it does kind of address the fact that this is a horrible world to live in, and which I think is essential to any Warhammer universe thing to be enjoyable. It has to acknowledge that it's a terrible universe to live in. Next up, this is Fallen, which is the third volume of the Warhammer 40k comic book. This one like wraps up everything in a very fun way. There's a lot of big old fight scenes, and there's one guy who's got this big claw thing, and I'm like, oh, he's cool. He's got this big claw thing, and he's attacking people with his big claw, and I'm like, oh, this is fun. It's dumb and silly, but it's very cool, and I had a good time with it, and it just really it highlighted a lot of fun elements of the universe. Loomis, what are you doing? Loomis! Come on, bro. God. You don't... What are you doing? What are you doing? Stop that. So it was, it was fun. It was nothing to write home about or like be like, oh, and it did have its fun, like, oh, none of these people, like, there's a point where it's like, oh, this could have ended peacefully if like Space Marines had any level of just being like, hey, let's talk this over, we're rational humans, right? So like I like scenes like that where you're like, oh, there was like a clear ending here that could have been solved had everyone not been fascists. So you're like, oh, that's fun, I like that, because again it quotes about how terrible the universe is, so that's cool. Next up is Chainsaw Man Volume 2. This was fun. So basically Chainsaw Man is like a fun manga because, again, everyone seems to be adults, which is very nice. Like all these characters are adults, so it's like less creepy. You don't feel creepy reading it, which is thank goodness. They have like, there's this guy who like has chainsaws for arms. You can just become Chainsaw Man, and he looks very cool. But the entire gist of this is basically like a Smut character has ended up in like a typical shonen anime. So it's very much like this is a person who's like supposed to become better and save the world and the chosen one, blah, blah, blah. But like our main character is just kind of like this guy who's like really into smut, and he's just like kind of this like sleazy dude. And the joke is like, oh wow, you're weird and creepy. Like everyone is like, damn, this dude is weird. And I think that just makes it all very much more fun because it's very tongue-in-cheek. And it seems like it's very much in on the joke, and the joke is basically like a smut character is in the middle of a shonen thing, so that was fun. This had them go on their like first quote unquote mission, and it was it was fine. Like it was cool. They were in this like weird hotel that like, oh, to escape you have to defeat the devil who owns this hotel, and it was fun. It was silly. Not my favorite, but I had a good time with it. Next up, there is a series of Ultraman manga. So Ultraman has got a manga series, and I was keeping up with it pretty regularly, but then I fell off. So I read 15, 16, and 17. The orders would be 15, then 17, and then 16, but they're all right in the middle. They're all right beside each other in this chunk, because they're all pretty much consistent. Like a lot of it is there are some big reveals of some plot stuff, which is just, if you're not into the series, if you haven't read all these series, me going over what is revealed here, it's not going to mean anything, right? So the only so much I could reveal here. The artwork is awesome. The fight scenes are awesome. A lot of the little character moments I had a lot of fun with. There is actually a really heart-wrenching background for a character revealed in this that I was just like, oh, wow, this is actually like really cool, good storytelling. I have a great time there. if you're interested in following like a fun manga series, I do think the Ultraman manga is quite fun. So I am continuing to enjoy it. But again, it's really hard to review that unless you're a person who is, consuming that regularly. Next up is the X-Files book, Goblins. I had a lot of fun with this. I mean, there were a few inconsistencies that happened, and I went into when I was talking to a lamp, as Criminale so kindly put it in one of my videos. That when I did my Garb Audio wasted weekend stuff, and I had a lot of fun with this. Of course, there's some inconsistencies, but I do think all the little character moments made this really worthwhile, and I had a great time with it. I love the X-Files. I haven't finished the X-Files. Will I ever finish the X-Files? Who knows? I've been watching it off and on for like 10 years now. But hey, I enjoy the X-Files. The X-Files is fun. This book is fun. I think it gets Mulder and Scully well. Like, this, you got to keep in mind, this was written early days of the X-Files, so all the character traits were not completely set in stone, so there was like a little bit of a leeway, and they weren't the characters that we knew later on in the series, right? So I had a great time with this. Just keep in mind it was written early in the X-Files, and I think you will have a good time. Next up, another Warhammer book. I'm sorry, there'll be quite a few here. This is The Siege of Terror, number 3, The First War. So The Siege of Terror is what's going to be a 9-book series that is literally all about one giant, prolonged, ginormous siege of Terra being Earth. So it's just a whole bunch of wars happening, and this is, I've actually read 3 of these this month. This is going to be the one at the bottom, but I actually don't think it's bad. I actually did enjoy this quite a bit. There is some bait and switch stuff that I enjoy, and the only things I was kind of like iffy on was there is this entire thing is all about the forces who are sieging this place, taking this gigantic, insane, huge spaceport that's like this tower that goes on and on and on, has like hundreds upon hundreds of levels, and I did have a little bit of difficulty trying to figure out what that spaceport kind of looked like. Like, I was trying to figure out, how would this look, how would it operate, where would this battle happen in, right? Like, I think it's just something that I probably, maybe on a second listen, I'll have a better idea of what the layout is, because there's a lot of characters who are split across this battle, because there's battles happening on all these huge different levels, right? And it's kind of hard to kind of keep track. Okay, so they're on the middle level? No, they're actually on the lower level. Oh, okay. And stuff like that. But for the most part, I had a great time with it. This is a series that I think excels because it's this big macro battle, and then it zooms right in on the individual human perspectives, and there's all these humans who are oh my, what is happening? Oh my god, I was a farmer yesterday and they threw me on a train and they gave me a gun and now I'm protecting the world. What is happening? And it's very fun, and I had a great time with it. So next up, the last Warhammer comic book I read, which is volume 2 of the Titan comics, and this one is Revelations, Warhammer 40,000 volume 2. This one is just so far above the others because of the simple reason that it's extremely fun. It is so fun, and it throws in all these different factions. So there's all of these all of the characters I know and love having battles. And you're oh, it's the Necrons. Oh, it's these weird Harlequin things, which are basically look like the Joker, and they show up and do weird things. I'm oh, this is fun. They're all battling, and it's all cool, and the artwork is cool, and it's oh, explosions, wow. I mean, it's nothing deeper than that. There was cool battles in this, and I like seeing, again, I love the artwork in this, so I was just ooh, it's so pretty. I like seeing the violence. So yeah, I enjoyed that. Next up, this is Siege of Terror, number 2. I actually read the first Siege of Terror book in December of last year, so this is the second one of that. A little bit better than the third version. Same writer, though. Both of those were written by Guy Haley. I had a lot of fun with this one. I really like this one, because this is So Terra is like this huge castle that's like made out of a mountain. They like smoothed over like the Himalayas and just made this gigantic palace. And all these people are trying to get into the palace. And this all takes place on the outer walls, like before they even like reach the main gates. So it's a lot of just normal people being like, oh my, what is happening? And it's like, war is hell. Everything is awful. What is happening here? And it really goes into just how petty, like, there's all these demigods who are like leading forces on both sides, and they're all just petty bitches. They're all like super petty, and it's like, it just shows the consequences of all these like petty gods being like, I think he's a jerk, so I'm gonna get 100 people killed because of it. And you're like, oh my gosh. Like, oh, this is so awful. And I love when you're looking at like huge cosmic battles from the perspective of a person who's just there, who's just like, man, I'm just like a guy who works in a factory. Someone handed me a gun and now I'm getting Lovecraftian horrors attacking me. Like, oh my god, what's gonna happen? Like, I really, really like that style of storytelling, so I had a great time with that. Next up, this is a classic. This is The Land That Time Forgot by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Now, this was not the full version of that. This was the first chunk of that. And I was just kind of prepping near the end of the month for my upcoming dinosaur celebration. And this was one of them. So I was like, oh. So I got it early. So this was really fun. It aged a lot better than I thought. It gets basically, the plot is like in World War One. There is a U-boat that sinks this ship, and then the survivors of that ship end up on another ship, but then the same U-boat attacks that ship. Anyways, regardless, eventually what happens is the Allied forces take over a German U-boat, and when they're trying to get to where they need to go, they end up in this mysterious land full of dinosaurs. And it was really fun. Like, I was like, oh, wow, this is like a really fun pulp story. At first, I was like, oh, because it was writing the females, like, in such a way that it's like, she is a delicate flower. I must protect her. And you're like, oh, God, I hope I'm not reading much of this. Like, ugh, this is dreadful. But then you quickly find out, it's like, oh, no, our main character is just, like, he's got all these preconceived sexist notions, because as soon as it gets going, like, that lady is kicking ass, and, like, she's doing things that, like, upending all the soldiers' expectations, because they're like, oh, you're so weak and helpless. And she's like, nah, bitch, I discovered who the spy is, and I shot that motherfucker. And you're like, damn. And I'm like, this is fun. I am having a good time. And then there's some dinosaurs. There's a bunch of dinosaurs. A lot of it is like this World War One battle happening, and then getting into the point of them getting to the land that I forgot. But I had a lot of fun with it. This is great. This is awesome. And it actually aged pretty well. Like, there were a few, like, so cavemen appear. They're all like white cavemen, but there were a few descriptions to describe their features where I was like, ooh. But like, really? Like, I'm talking like, there were 2 lines, and like, that was it. And we're talking about a book that was released in 1918. So it was like, this ages like pretty well for a book in 1918. There's only like a few iffy bits. And the dinosaur violence is awesome. There's like dinosaurs. They're like, whoa, they're shooting the dinosaurs. Wow. So cool. So yeah, I had a great time with this. I'm excited to explore the other 2. I'm a bit less interested because they get away from the dinosaurs, and like in the second half of the book, it's a lot like, and this is this tribe, and this is how this tribe does things, and this is this tribe, this is how they do things a little differently than the other tribe. And I'm like, get back to the dinosaurs. Where's my T-Rex boys? But there's a good boy dog as well, and the good boy dog is a good boy. So yeah, this is fun. Next up is Volume 1 of Chainsaw Man. And this one was awesome. I think the only reason Volume 2 is so much lower is because the joke kind of gets a little old. But like at this point where it's just like his origins, and it's just very, very funny. Because it's like, it sets up a very atypical version of the hero's journey where the hero does not actually care that much and is not that concerned with like being heroic. And he's really just all about that smut life. And I think it's like funny because again it's knowingly being like, wow, this guy is like weird and creepy, and it's just it's very kind of like, it doesn't feel super exploitative because it feels like the joke is that this guy is the way he is. It's hard to explain. It seems like a lot of people don't like the joke, right? There are people who are like, how could I ever abide by someone with such low morals? And I'm like, yeah, he's just a loser who can get chainsaws for arms. That's their joke. He's like a loser who ends up having these nice powers, and he doesn't do anything for noble means. He just wants to get kisses. That's why he'll fight the demons and save the day. And I'm like, I just think that's funny. I think it's funny because almost all of the rest of manga, so much manga is like, and I am this noble man who will do the noble things and protect the world. So this is kind of like a really fun parody about that, where it's just like, nah, this guy's just kind of a scumbag, but he got chainsaw for arms, and I guess he's going to do what he needs to. And yeah, I just really found that joke funny. Like, I thought it was good. And the artwork is also, like, amazing, and there's, like, some huge, just, like, gory scenes that I love, so. Now we're talking Mountain Darkness #1, the Wild Mountain Man series. Talking about a character from a smut novel. Now we're just talking about smut novels. Vanessa Vale writes a great smut novel that has some hilarious scenes. Like, we were talking some scenes that just blew me out of the water. There's a scene where, like, it's basically a throuple book where, like, these two guys, like, this lady, like, someone dies in her house that she's staying in. So she's, like, the suspect in this murder case, and the sheriff is like, I have always loved you, and then you came back and I haven't seen you since. But then there's this other guy in, like, the DA office who's like, my best friend loves you, but I also love you. And then what happens is they become a throuple. And they get down to Throuple Town. And it's in good smut scenes. The only thing about this one, the second one will appear higher on this list. But the first one, it's very much a case of sometimes the smut gets in the way of the plot. Sometimes I was like, okay, but I need to figure out who did the murder. Okay, but who did the murder? Okay, no, I'm down for the smut, but this is a pretty short book. Are you sure you guys want to smut right now? Like, don't you? There's a murderer out there. Okay, we're smutting again. I mean, I'm not complaining that hard, but I mean, someone's got to solve this murder. And they're not too interested in the murder. But there is this amazing scene where the guy who's like in the DA office, his dad is the mayor, and he's like, I don't want to be this way anymore, Dad. I'm going to independent practice. I don't want to be mayor man. And his dad's like, how dare you? And then he's like, and also, because I'm in love with this lady. And the mayor's like, how dare you? She's a suspect in a matter. And he's like, well, not only that, but also my best friend is banging her as well. It's a throuple, bitch. And like, he's all like, oh my God, I'm the mayor. This is shocking. Oh. So yeah, that was great. Next up, Predator, Hunters and Hunted, the Oppressor movie prequel. This is just fun. I've read this one before, had a good time with it. It's basically like a prequel to a movie that sucks, but it's way better than the movie that it's a prequel to. And it's also clearly based on an earlier script for that. It's like a very weird, like, this is like one of those books where you're like, this book is great. Everything surrounding this book kind of sucks, but it's just about these guys who are hunting predators, and there's a lot of cool action where the predators show up and they predator peoples, and you're like, whoa, and there's cool action sequences, and they're at a carnival at the end, they're fighting a predator in a carnival. It's pretty fun. Next up, Talon, which is a Warhammer novel. I'm sorry. It's a thing I'm into. I'm reading a lot of them. Keep me alone. This one is a bunch of tank battles. They're on this planet that gets bombed. And it's like, oh my God, we can't breathe. Oh, everyone's gonna die if we go out and breathe. So I have to fight in these tanks. And the tanks are like sealed up tight. And they're like, we're gonna have to do all this tank battling and go in and find the people. And they go, bam, bam, bam. And it's like, whoa, tank battles. Bam, 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 bam. Exciting stuff. I had a good time with it. It is actually kind of told in a bunch of novellas where it's like little sections, little stories that are fit into this larger battle as a whole. And I really kind of like that structure. I got this from the library, but I had to end up keeping it because I got clawed by Loomis and it got blood all over the book. And the librarian's like, yeah, bitch, you're going to have to replace that. And I'm like, Yeah, that's fair. But then I brought it to the thing and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to replace this, and they're like, actually, nah, just pay us $1 and you can keep it. And I was like, woo! So now I got this cool thing about sci-fi tank battles in my collection. Thank you, Loomis, for attacking me. He wasn't like attacking me. He was like, when he goes on his wheel, he likes to like have me like make little sounds on the other side of the wheel, and then he like tries to like claw behind me. And that's how he got me in the claw. And, it's Loomis shit. Next up, I read Tomei by Junji Tao, and this is like a gigantic manga. Like it's large, man. I think it could take some bullets. This is like basically like madness. It's like this teenage girl who's like, she just like shows up, and like every time she like looks at a person, she goes like flips her hair, and they go, oh my goodness, Tomei, I love you. But then they go, oh my god, I love you so much, Tomei, but I want to murder you now. And they like murder her in horrific ways. And then like the next day, Tomei shows up and is like, oh, what happened? And they're like, oh my god, Tomei, I murdered you. What is going on? Ah! And they go mad. There's like a bunch of that. There's like a bunch of other stuff happens. She like, Tomei is like a force of nature. She just like shows up and like, she does a whole bunch of madness, man. You have to read Tomei to understand Tomei. All I'm going to say is I'm never going to watch My Cousin Vinny the same way ever again. Next up, The Nest by Gregory A. Douglas. It was good. It was good. It's a giant cockroach novel. It's good. It held up. It held up on the re-listen. Kelsey was right. Criminale was wrong. As usual. The Nest. If you want to hang out on a place on an island and, read about people in Cape Cod fighting giant cockroaches, you ain't gonna find another novels like this. Also, them cockroaches, they go in places cockroaches will never be going. Let's just say that. Keep them cockroaches away from me. Next up, Mountain Delights, The Wild Mountain Man #2. Vanessa Vale does it again, but she does it even better in the second one, because this one is absolute perfection. Because the smut and the plot, they intertwine together, baby, and it all works out perfectly. Because there's this lady, and she's like, oh my goodness, I'm a skier, but I had a skiing accident, but I'm gonna think about rejoining skiing, but life is like, there's so many complicated things. So she's seeing this guy, and this guy's like, you should go up to this ranch. And when you go up to this ranch, meet my friend and go, hey, friend, booba jabamba, boo-ah, smut stuff. And then, and then he comes up and he's like, hey, that's my girlfriend. And the friend's like, what? And then the girlfriend's like, throuple time. And it's in the same town as the first one. So there's like 2 throuples going on in this small mountain town. And it's amazing because they have moments where they interact with the other throuple. It's so good. It's so good. I love this town in America that is just thruple city, man. Everyone's thrupling, man. There's 2 more. We're still, we're getting moments where we're learning more about the murder case. They're not directly involved in the murder as much. Like the one, technically the one dude's sister is the one who got murdered. And the other dude's father took the rap, but he didn't actually do it. So yeah, they're both really actually very involved in the murder case, but they're not actively investigating it. They're not actively investigating the murder case. So, they have a lot of complicated feelings about this case, and they're getting through it with the thruppling. The thruppling. And this was just great. Had a great plot. There was actually some really funny scenes. Again, Vanessa Vale, very funny. There's a scene where you think like some cool thruple stuff is going to happen, and then all of a sudden, a skunk comes out, and the skunk's like, spray, I'm a skunk. And then they have to, it's like, we're about to get nasty, and then this skunk came out and got us. And I'm like, it's funny, it's silly. I love it. Anyways, if you're a degenerate like me, you would love this. Next up, Gazgul Thraka, Prophet of Wow. Another Warhammer novel, but this one's pretty funny. Like, this is like the history of this orc, and this orc is very funny. It's very funny. It's like this leader of the orcs, and it's very funny. So, I had a lot of fun with this, told in a really unique way. You get a lot of like little things here that I really like. Like, there's a scene where it's revealed that all the orcs go by they, them pronouns. So I'm like, we have no choice but to stand our non-binary orc lord. You go, Gazgul. You do your thing. Next up, I'm amazed this got this high, but this is Ninja at First Sight by Penny Reed. This was just an amazing romance novel where I was like very invested in the romance, and I was like, ooh, what's going on? And they have all these like quirky conversations, and I'm like, ooh, tell me more, tell me more. I loved it. I might just start reading a bunch of quirky romances. I think that might be a thing I do now. I'm gonna add it, sprinkle it in with the novels of like war is hell, but also romance is quirky. Aw, very cute. Loved it. Next up, I swear, we're almost done with my Warhammer novels, but this is The Vernacular Insurgency, The Ghost Dossier #1. This is a Gaunt's Ghost novel, which is a series of novels by Dan Abnett. This is really just about War is Hell, the novel, and it's just the Warhammer universe told from like a very singular platoon, and all these people who are like very cool. This actually came out last year, but is actually set in between two books. And where I've been reading the ghost novels, I had read books 1 and 2, and then at my library they had this one which fits in between books 2 and 3. So I just decided to read it now, and then I'll read the third one later. Had a great time with this. Really good, really interesting. The character work in this is great. What it says about the world is fantastic. The action sequences are like bar none, outstanding. Dan Abnett does it again. I just love spending time with these characters, and I think that this is like a great scenario to put them in, because it's basically like there's no big war to fight, so they're actually fighting an insurgency that's happening after they've retaken a planet for the Emperor of Mankind, who is a turd, but these guys are just kind of caught in an unjust war, and now it's them who are basically like occupying a place that, you know, was kind of doing fine, and then they came in and destroyed everything, right? So it's, you know, it's just very interesting. Shows the aftermaths of war. Great character work in this. Mwah. Dan Abnett does it again. Next up, a book that I just finished. This is the newest Alien book, Alien Enemy of My Enemy by Mary San Giovanni. And oh my goodness, this was absolutely amazing. The character work, mwah, the horror, mwah, the action, mwah. It was like, whoa, this is awesome. I love this. This is everything I want from an alien novel. It's tense, it's scary, it's cool, there's interesting characters, there's amazing descriptions of Carnage. So yeah, 100%. Everything I wanted from an alien novel. I really need to read more Mary San Giovanni's work, because yeah, I was extremely impressed by this. This is a book that really highlights the effect of world building in Alien. So you can have this story where it's set in this very specific spot, like, because it starts on this moon that's like slowly falling apart, and is about to just be completely like decimated due to like a cosmic shenanigans. The moon they're going on to is about to just no longer be a thing. Like the whole moon is falling apart. So it starts there, and then it just keeps expanding and expanding, and then it starts small and then ends up in like a very big scenario. And I just thought that was really interesting and really intriguing, and nothing felt like it was short-sighted. So everything got everything got the full attention that it deserved, and it was just outstanding. So I had a lot of fun with this and would 100% recommend it. The last Warhammer novel, but by far the best, this was Saturnine, which is The Siege of Terra #4. And this book was just everything that's cool about Warhammer, and everything's cool about the Siege of Terra series, all rolled up into one great big amazing sandwich and written by Dan Abnett, who knows his shit. I absolutely love this. There was all these like the audiobook was great because there's like this voice like, "It's me, Fulgrim." That's one of the characters sounds like that, and I just keep using that voice on my cats, like this clip here.
Hello, Loomis. It is I, Fulgrim, here to pet the kitty. You are a beautiful kitty. Do you like my weird voice that I'm doing? I heard it on an audiobook. It will destroy my voice. I probably should have recorded the actual video before this. Oh well, my voice will never be the same again.
And yeah, I just had a great time with this. It expands the Warhammer universe because like this is technically a series that's kind of a prequel to what we thought we knew about this world, and it expands it in a very interesting way, and all these characters have really unique and interesting insights and conversations, and yeah, it was just really outstanding and fantastic. And you know, it was just, yeah, it was everything that I could possibly have wanted from one of these stories. So action, characters, you know, there are a series of decisions that are made, and it shows the consequences of the decisions made in war. It just gets into the injustice of war and does it all in a very fun package. So absolutely loved it. Second, but it's slim margin. I might even, like, there'll be days where this one or the one after this will be kind of switching positions because they're both, like, outstanding. This is Ducks, 2 Years in the Oil Sands by Kate Beaton. This is like a graphic novel, and it's absolutely outstanding. Like, it is amazing. There are so many interesting things to glean from this novel. It is a novel about a woman in her early 20s who goes out to work in the oil sands of Alberta, which in Canada is a place where we get all of the oil, essentially, and it's all processed, and it comes everywhere, right? So a lot of times growing up, it was this idea of you go to school, you get all this debt. If you want to pay it off or you want to try to get ahead in life, you have to go work at the oil sands because it pays really well. But the thing is, it like isolates you from all these communities. It's terrible for the environment. It's terrible for the people who work there. It treats all these people like real human beings. And it also really kind of outlines what it was like to be a woman in these isolated work camps. And there's some harrowing stuff in this, but it's really powerful. The illustrations are beautiful. The overall message of the book is just it's just absolutely outstanding, and really just kind of gets the heart of this ecological problem, but gets the heart of the problem not just from the visions of ecology, but getting on the level of the people who live in these scenarios, who work in these scenarios, who this is like the only hope they have to get out of debt. And it's like really kind of talks about how the gears of capitalism just screw us all over and just destroy us all, essentially. And yeah, absolutely beautiful, absolutely outstanding. I 100% recommend. It's a must read if you are a person who enjoys graphic novels. Even if you don't enjoy graphic novels, Ducks by Kate Beaton is like an absolute recommend. Last but certainly not least, this is Grady Hendrix's How to Sell a Haunted House, another one with a voice that I just used on all of my cats. See here.
Hello, Loomis. Pumpkin love you. Pumpkin love Loomis. Pumpkin's a T-Rex in a witch hat. Where you going? Pumpkin thinks you should do bad things, Loomis. Hello, Claude. It's me, Pumpkin. Cock-a-wee-wee.
This was funny. This was insightful. This was moving. This was scary. This is everything that you would want from a horror novel, and I absolutely love this. I normally don't like creepy clowns or creepy puppets at all. Like, it's not something that I found particularly interesting in the past, or even something that I think is particularly effective for me. Like, I never find it that scary. But Grady Hendrix, like with exorcisms, right? Because exorcism as a genre was never really something I thought of much as being something that interests me. But, you know, my best friend's exorcism is absolutely outstanding. And he similarly does something to the extent of using the creepy doll, creepy puppets, and oh my, he does everything you would want with it. And also, I think this book really understands siblings' relationships a lot, because like I know that brother starts out. I was kind of worried that the brother was going to be too broad, like he was kind of being projected too broadly at the start of this book. But once they finally go in and talk about him, and they go into his past, and they go into why he is the way he is, you really kind of understand how this all came to be. And it also really understands the fact of when you are around a sibling, especially, if you grew up in a maybe contentious household a little bit, there's a little bit of you that will always kind of revert when you're around them, especially if you don't talk to them like a lot, right? Like there's a level of reversions when you meet them. And I think this book really captures what it's like to have like siblings that you're like, I like you. You're like, there's like this distance, like both from space and time and everything, right? So yeah, I just think it captures that sibling relationship really interesting and really well and interesting, and everything about this was outstanding. So 100% love this book. I do think that genuinely, I do think Grady Hendrix might be my favorite author. I didn't realize this until now, but yeah, I do think Grady Hendrix might be my favorite author, because I seem to just kind of love everything he does. So that's that. What did you read this month? Did you have any favorites? Thank you for watching this extremely long video, and I hope you have a great day. Goodbye.